So this is some of the stuff that I kept from the video that we had. So it was just we connected the home page. If I were to, what was that? If I were to resume the canvas, you'll see that we have the home page in the very first tab. It's got tag 0, meaning it's the first one, because when you code, we usually start the index, or we usually start like the position of things at element 0. We don't call it element number 1. We say element 0. So that's just usually what we start with. And it'll take some time to load, but I will also go over these things. So there's just the text, and then the system name. This is from SF Symbols. So if you guys wanted to look at a lot of different different symbols, you can download that from the Apple Store or Apple website, where you also download an Xcode. And yeah, it probably will not load. So I can just like wait for it here. So this is what we had last time. We had an image of the thermometer with a specific set frame with 50 pixels and height 100 pixels. Then we had the text neuroscience. And then the navigation bar title was the date, last time's date. Today's date is October 6th, so I will change that. Usually if this thing loaded, you'd be able to see that it was changed immediately. So we had a test file. So one thing about Swift is you can have the two files side by side. I'm going to be closing one of them and just having it like this. Oh, finally it loaded. Okay. And so you guys can see it updated the October 6th, because that's what I changed it to. And I want to go to the test file. So right now these are both, they're just they're the same copy showing two different like files, or two of the same file. I want to look at test, and this canvas is just for this view. So this would be just something else. We had the word test, so the navigation link would go to this one. But we want to start off the home page. So we would have different symptoms, physical symptoms of dementia, often like wandering off, or inability to like wear clothes and all of that. And sometimes you fall as well. And then in the mental symptoms, you have just like the regular things, forgetfulness, like loss of memory. Then you also have social symptoms. So sometimes people who have dementia don't want to, don't want to interact as much with others. So they sometimes get isolated in their social life. And so those are all the symptoms that we would have. So we would want 3 different buttons for physical, mental, and social. But this one will just be physical for now. So I'm going to rename this struct. It's similar to a class, but this one is when it says var body :some view, it shows that it's a view type we would be creating like the view here. And you specifically have to put it in var body and within a struct, because it is of type view. So we would call this physical, and let's just call it var physical. Yeah, you guys can follow along as well. I'll resume the canvas to show that. And oh yeah, there's an error because what I didn't do was rename it. So previews, this shows up in Canvas. So anything that it just recalls the struct here and it just puts it in the preview of Canvas. But I still need to rename it because there is no longer any struct called test. And if you guys have any questions, just feel free to unmute yourself. I'm going to rename the file very quickly here. Yeah.
And the navigation link in the other page also needs to change to physical. So
yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you guys just saw that, but sometimes I don't know. I just keep getting an error right now. There we go. Physical. Okay, great. Oh, sorry, I spelled it wrong. Physical. And sometimes the canvas doesn't work This is probably because right now my computer is kind of slow. It's got a lot of errors. So if you see this, this is oftentimes not because like you coded something wrong. If you coded something wrong, most of the time you'll see the red things showing you that you did something wrong. This is just something wrong with the canvas. It can be pretty finicky. So unfortunately, we won't be able to preview it in Canvas. We can still build it through the simulator. So I will just do that right now. And then I'll put it on the side so you guys can see it. Oh, can you guys see it actually? I don't know if you guys can. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second, sorry. And I'll just share my desktop. All right, good. Right here. So this is our simulator. And it'll take some time to load, but you'd be able to see that it shows physical when we click the navigation link that goes into the struct physical. So instead of test, which is what we had last time, it would show the word physical. Yeah, I'll let it load on the side. Do you guys have any questions? No? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we're adding the code and we're like pushing and pulling it, do you want us to add comments just so it's easier to read it?
Oh yes, please. Yeah, so when you push, generally, well, actually, so here, I'll go through something. So right now in simulators, so if you push, you actually won't be able to have like comments. But what you do is if you want to push and commit at the same time, committing is just saving it on your local Mac or yeah, on your local Mac. You have the comment section here, the commit message. This is where I always put my own messages just to show like everyone else, the people you're collaborating with, what the new changes you have are. So like, oh, I added a home button, or I changed it from the test file to become the physical file and to show certain things. That's just what you would put in there.
There was also a check mark on the commit that allows you to also push, so you can also commit and push and still add your comments.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys might have to see that report thing show up. I think Xcode has something wrong with it right now, but at least this works. Okay. So I can click on the neuroscience and it would show physical because it is in the physical struct. But right now, oh yeah, I don't know what's wrong with this. Okay, so this is the home page, and we want to modify it to actually show like things that look more like buttons. Currently, it just looks like a link. It doesn't look too much like a button. So what we would do is we would actually not use the navigation view right here. We would actually have a button. So I will comment all of this out for now, and then we will start with this. Oh, last time we also went through Geometry Reader. Just a quick little thing. Geometry Reader allows you to read the size of the device that you're currently working with. Right now I'm on iPhone 11, so iPhone SE might look different. It'll be smaller, but Geometry Reader allows you to scale things proportionally. So I will be putting a Geometry Reader, and we need a variable. You could call it geometry, anything. We'll just be using it to scale the sizes. And then inside this geometry reader, let's say we want an H stack, because with a button, you would have a picture, right? If you have a picture, you would have a picture right next to a word. It could be on top or on the bottom, but I'm going to choose to put it on the side. So I would need an H stack to group elements horizontally. So right here, I will add an H stack, and then I will put a button. So with buttons, you have an action because buttons always do something. So here, I would say that I want to show that this button goes to the physical view to show physical, the word physical. And how would I do that? I would have to, what I would do is have a variable called physical and then set that equal to true. it would originally be false, but when I click this button, what the action does is make the physical Boolean true. A Boolean is just a variable that's either false or true. So you guys can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, okay, good. Yeah, I don't know, my computer's been kind of weird, but yeah. So this is the action. I am currently setting the physical symptom to be true. I have a self here to reference that it is inside this struct that I am making the variable in. However, it gives me a red underscore, gives me an error. That's because I'm using a variable that I have not declared or initialized. So what I would do is I would go up here, and it is a state variable. State variables just tell you like the current state that you are at. So if it's like false or true right now, so we would have this state. Then we would say it's private because we only want to have the physical variable within this struct. Then we're going to say var physical is equal to false. We initialized it to a value of false. And here, this button has an action of true. So when we click on the button, then it will show true. And right now, let's say I will go text, turn button to true, or true, just something like that. And if we were to run it on the simulator, then it will show that. Yeah, it'll take some time to load. So right here, there are two ways to do a button, to actually create a button. This is the way that I'll be showing you guys a different way sometime later. But with this, we have the action in the front, and then the what's inside, or what the button is composed of in between the curly brackets. So you see here that the button is now turn button to true. It doesn't have an action right now, or it does have an action, but it doesn't go anywhere right now because we haven't linked it to anything. But right now, let's actually format the button so that it looks like it has a frame and has a actual like shape to it rather than just being link. So what we do here, inside the button, I want an H stack. I want to be able to put the pictures next to the words. And it's already in the H stack, sorry. But we have, instead of having just text, let's say we want an image, let's say system name, and we would use the same thermometer. Okay, so if inside this H stack, then we have that. Actually, I'm going to bring the H stack around here. And a way you guys can format your code is by doing Control-I. It'll just automatically tab everything for you. So I put the H stack inside the button because the button surrounds the whole thing. I want everything inside the H stack to be part of the button. I want the image to be also a part of the button. That's why I have the H stack in here. So if I were to run it again, you guys will see that the image is now to the left of the text, turn button to true. Right here. And it's really small though. We don't want it to put it on the side. So what I will do is I will add a VStack. And then I will tab all of these things. And then I will put dot padding, just creates like a little cushion. And I'll just say dot leading. I only want it on the side. So if we build it again, it should show a space, or at least it shouldn't be right at the edge of the screen. Yes. And inside this H stack, I want to have the button to be a bigger size. So what I will do is I will modify the text so that it has dot system So here, I'm going to move on to the side. So here we have, we're using the geometry reader. We're saying that the font size is going to be 0.07 of the ratio of the whole screen, of the width of the screen. So that's what the size would be. And then we also want to give it a font weight. Let's say we want it to be bold, since the button is like a headline. And we have some padding. If we want to separate it from the image, we will give it a little bit of cushion to separate that. And then here, we also want to modify the image. So we would have frame width. Then we have geometry dot size dot width, and let's give it a width of 0.2 compared to the width of the screen, and a height of 0.1. Right? Sorry, I have parentheses. Should be times, multiply symbol. All right. So if we run this now, we should see that it's changed a little bit. And everything has been a little bit bigger. Yes. But then the image itself isn't actually bigger. But there is a frame and there is padding between them that causes that. So for now, I will comment out the padding. And I will say resizable. Whoa, not rotation effect, sorry. Resizable. Okay. So what resizable basically does is it resizes the image to actually match how big the frame has like gone to, right? And so if we also did dot scale to fit, right, these are all things that would modify to actually like change the size proportionally to what we have changed the frame to. So if I were to run it, then we would see that it's changed a lot bigger because we have modified it so that it would change proportionally. That is a bit big, but for now I will leave it like that. But right now, all we did is make it so that the link or the button looks slightly bigger. What's inside the button looks slightly bigger, but it doesn't have a shape around it. It doesn't have like a circle or a rectangle or anything. So what I want to do is I want to make it a rectangle. I want to make the button look like a rectangle. So what I will do is inside the button, there's an H stack. I will add a padding around it so that the button itself has some cushion around it compared to the rest of the stuff on the screen or the size of the screen. And then I will also give it a color. So with color, there are two different things. There's a foreground color. Foreground color just says what the font color would be. Let's say it's black. Background color gives it a color that will fill in the shape of your button. Right now, it's really a rectangle. It's already a rectangle, but it's a rectangle that has like a transparent background, so you can't actually see anything. So I will give it a color of dot light or color dot light gray. Right? These are just things in the system, in the Xcode system already there for us from Apple. I didn't have to make the color myself or set anything to it. So these are the two different ways to actually have the color. Notice here that background does not have background color, it's just background, and you have to put the color actually inside of this, whereas here it's foreground color before you have the color right here. Then let's run it on the simulator. You'll see that the rectangle has very sharp edges right there. So the colors you guys can fiddle around with later on your own free time, but we don't want buttons to look that sharp and jagged because they're not very nice to work with or to look at either. So we wanted to have kind of curved corners, and how that would work is with corner radius. it gives it a radius of a certain CG float in Xcode or in Swift is like the decimals. So in Java, you would have like the doubles or the floats. And notice that the Xcode version or the Swift version also has CG float, the word float inside it. So it's really just decimals. I want to give it, let's say just 5.0 for now. And you'll see that the corners actually change. So they now have like a radius of 5. So if you were to think of these corners having little circles in them, then that circle has a radius of 5, and so it's curved with 5 pixels. I don't know if you guys can see that through my screen. I'll make that a bit more drastic. Let's say 15. And so you guys should be able to definitely see the curve in the button. Yes. So that's what we want. We have the button to actually have curved corners now rather than the jagged edges that we had. And let's say we want some padding inside of the button. You'll notice that like the image looks pretty close to the top and the bottom of the button. Same with the text. So we didn't actually add any padding to the image. I'm also going to scale down the size of the image a little bit. And notice that it doesn't actually ruin the shape. It doesn't like compress it or stretch it or anything. That's because we have these things. I'm going to put 0.5, and I'm just going to put like 1 or something like that. So it's slightly smaller. It might be a bit small, but for now we'll have that. And we also want padding because currently like the images was really close. When it was big, it was really close. It still is really close. And you'll notice that the button actually changed size because the button changes size according to what's inside of it. So let's add a dot padding. It'll have a padding on the left, the right, the top, and the bottom. And you can actually separate it. You can say dot padding, dot top, dot bottom. Actually, like this. And if I were to change it to bottom, it'll be at the top and the bottom. Because I'll leave the left and the right as is. Looks pretty good right now. So if you have it like that, I should also change you'll notice that the top and the bottom did change. And for the text, I want some padding around it at the end. So I'll say dot padding dot trailing. What trailing is it's saying like it trails the end of it. That's just like, I guess, Swift's term for the end, the right end. When they have dot leading is just the left beginning. It's like the beginning of it. When we read left to right, right is trailing, left is leading. But right now I want the padding to be at the trailing side of it. So let's run it again. So after we have this, yes, there should be padding now. After we have this, we see that the button is not centered. It isn't in the middle of things. It isn't in the middle of the screen. And so what we would do is we want it to be right smack dab in the center of things. And to do that, there's one way we could do is have the button inside of an H stack. In an H stack, we have elements where we just have elements spaced side by side. So if we were to add like spacers on the left and the right of the button, then we could move the button into the center. So I will currently change this to become an H stack for now. And I will put a spacer in it. So let's see what it does. And then I'll tell you guys what it does later. Yeah, so I put this spacer on in the front of the button and on the back of the button. And you'll notice that it should be in centered, but that's because I have padding right here. So if I were to comment that out, then there is no longer any padding in the front. And now the button is perfectly centered. So what a spacer does, it just adds like space, space. It adds space to anything that you want it to do. If you wanted to move this button to the very bottom of the page, then you would put a spacer in front of it in a V stack because it's organizing things vertically. Here we have spacers to the left and right of the button because we want to put the button exactly in the center of the screen. So that's what we have. And let's have a navigation bar title called text October 6, 2020. Then it will display the title at the very top on top of the, or it should. Sorry, I probably put this somewhere wrong. Oh, okay. One second. That's because I didn't add a navigation view. Yeah, and sometimes you'll find that these things are a bit weird. You have to add certain things or else they won't work. So you'll notice that now we have the space. Space between the title and the button. The button is no longer at the very top. The reason why we have that is because when we create something, we always, our Swift always starts it in the middle of the page, right? But we want to move it to the top. We want to move it to the top underneath the title. So how we would do that is, and I'm just going to finish with adding the navigation link with this one second. So I'm going to have a V stack around the whole thing because I want to put a spacer underneath the button so that it will push everything to the top of the screen. So now you'll see that on the side, the button's at the top. It returned to the top. It's also centered in the middle of the screen, of the width of the screen. So we have 3 spacers in total. We have one spacer to the left of the button, one spacer to the right of the button. So the button is now centered in the middle. And then we also have one spacer at the bottom of the button, so pushing it all the way up. And the reason why you guys might see that the spacers look like they have different sizes, spacers are scaled depending on what elements you have or how many elements you have. Here we have something, we have an element that has already a frame. And so the spacer would only modify it a little bit just to center it. But here, the spacer also, or the button also has a frame vertically, but there is nothing around it, so the spacer will just automatically push everything up. If we were to have a second button, it would be right underneath the button, and the spacer would still push it all the way up. But if we didn't have the spacer underneath the button, or if we add a second button underneath the 2 buttons, then the 2 buttons would be centered directly in the middle of the screen if you look from top to bottom. All right, but right now it doesn't do anything. We can see it like click, but it doesn't go anywhere. So what we want to do is we want to have a dot sheet. A dot sheet, what this does is, actually I'll do this first and then I'll show you guys, I'll tell you guys what it does. And you guys can follow along for that. Is it called? And we will see. So the dot sheet is a different type of view. Oftentimes when you look at Apple, they have these things where you can click onto a certain button or a link and it brings you a page that goes from bottom to the top. it like zooms into, or it's like a sheet that pops up into the view, but it pops up really smoothly into the view. That's called a sheet. These are different types of views. A sheet is actually one set of modal, and a modal is like a view that you could have. And so the dot sheet here is something that we're going to use to show that, or to have the screen pop up going from the bottom to the top. I noticed that I didn't have to code anything specific to have that animation. It's all inherent inside Swift already, so all we have to use is use it, and that's why we chose to use SwiftUI instead. So that concludes our lesson today. So we finished building our first button on the home page. Actually, I will not call it turn button to true. I will call it physical, because that's what we wanted. We wanted it to be called physical and have it go inside the physical view, inside this physical struct. And the button changed size automatically, but we can deal with that later. So that's what we have. We finished building the first physical button. We'll have social and mental down here later. And you guys can also code that on your own. We'll have that set up for you guys because it'll be the same exact code. But yeah,